My name's Rhonda Kelly. I am the director of the ResponderStrong program at the National Mental Health Innovation Center at CU Anschutz in Colorado. I was a firefighter paramedic for 17 years and an ER nurse and psych ER nurse on the side, who became very interested in the mental wellness of emergency responders and saw a need for us to improve mental health supports for responders and their families, not only in Colorado but across the country. I worked as a firefighter paramedic for 17 years. During the course of my career, I saw the impact emotionally and psychologically that the occupation had, not only on myself, but on my coworkers. And I saw that it was an area of need that we really weren't addressing. We weren't equipping our personnel to handle. In fact, we weren't even making them aware of the fact that the emotional exposures on the job can be some of the most critical that we experience and some of the most detrimental. I met the director of the National Mental Health Innovation Center several years ago. He wanted to work with emergency responders, and we started to brainstorm a more effective way to handle this. Our approach was to cross branch boundaries to eliminate the isolation of just working within an individual agency or within a branch, whether it be law enforcement, fire, EMS, or dispatch. We recognized that no matter how effective or how good the system of resources we created was, unless we changed the culture that we're embedded in, away from one that tells us any sign of emotional or psychological impact is a sign of weakness and a sign that we're not fit for the job, we're not going to be, those resources are not going to be utilized effectively. So he brainstormed, he created the National Mental Health Innovation Center, gave me a call about 2.5 years ago and said, I think we can make something happen. We created ResponderStrong in August of 2016 with 35 members. We now have more than 560 volunteers across the state, and we're working with responders from other states. We recognize the need is not only national but international, and we are working from the inside to change our culture and to do it by creating not only awareness and education, but building tools and resources for responders to use. It turns out now we recognize suicide as the leading occupational killer of emergency responders. Although the professions themselves are hazardous, we have seen a decrease in the line of duty death from other causes over the years because we recognize the hazards, and we trained and we equipped ourselves to combat them and to mitigate them. Now we recognize we need to change our culture into one that is supportive of mental wellness and one that encourages open discussion of the mental health impacts of the profession and teaches people to protect themselves proactively and to recognize when they need more assistance, whether that's clinical in nature or other. We are working from the inside to change our culture. We know the response world tends to listen to its own more than it does anybody else, and we're working to take better care of our own. One of the things that we have been doing is to increase self-awareness and to normalize the mental and psychological toll the job can take on responders is through educational programs. We're working with community colleges. We are working with various agencies to enhance the mental health curriculum that they teach within their academies and their training sessions. We are creating easily accessible resiliency training for the individuals and for agency to be distributed for free through our website. We are also working to improve some of the supports that are out there, whether that is through our program to create a counselor certification, an endorsement program, so responders, very similar to the military, what they have through the VA and through organizations like VFW, can go to a list of clinicians who've taken on additional training to understand responder culture, to understand responder exposures, and to recognize the signs of trauma, and to know how to treat them or to refer those clients to somebody who's capable of treating them. We are creating crisis resources for responders to reach out to that offer confidentiality and offer informed care and direction to care. We are also working to create better networking, not only among the clinicians and among agencies, but also among other supporters of emergency responders, whether those be chaplains or educators, doctors, psychiatrists, counselors. We're working with emerging technologies. One of the most exciting fields is virtual reality. Responders train for all of the quote-unquote important skills in scenario-based environments. These are the skills that will save their lives or someone else's. And the reason we train for those in scenarios is so that we ingrain those skills to the muscle memory level. When we jump off the rig or we step onto a scene, we will default to those practices, those behaviors, without thinking about it. In the past, we haven't trained for mental wellness, or if we have, it's been in the form of stress management training around a coffee table, drinking coffee, tea with your buddies, laughing, joking, learning box breathing, which is great, but we're not learning it in the same way that we do the rest of our skills, and we're not ingraining it to the muscle memory level. So we're working in the VR realm to create mental wellness, self-regulation training for responders in times of stress and crisis, so that those skills become second nature to them to help head off the accumulation of traumatic exposures and unprocessed trauma during a responder's career. We're also working with apps like iRelate, which is a new platform for peer support around mental health issues. They are allowing also private and semi-private chat rooms for individual groups. We're building one out for emergency responders, so that if responders are located someplace, say rural, where they don't have a lot of support, or they're housed in an agency that isn't very supportive of mental wellness, or they're an agency that's so small they're fearful that they would be discovered and maybe ostracized for struggling with depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress, they can reach out, talk to other responders who are non-judgmental, who have the same experience, who understand, and are there for them to support them through their crises. Some of the concerns that have arisen in the group debriefing session is that it can be traumatizing for those who weren't aware of certain aspects or facets of this scenario. It can also be traumatizing for the individual to relive, to recount, to walk back through what he or she experienced. What we're shifting towards is not the details so much, but the emotional reaction that the responder had. What are you feeling? Let's process that. Let's talk about that. Let's help you work through it rather than just bury it. We recognized in the past that the responder culture encouraged individuals to bury whatever they were feeling, to compartmentalize it. But in that burying, we often created an internal wound, while on the outward appearance, appearing callous and fine and unimpacted. And that's been the root of a lot of our problems. So we are shifting now towards a normalization that we should expect an emotional impact. That in itself is often what responders need to hear up front. Lots of times it is the shame, the fear that nobody else is feeling this, maybe I'm not equipped for this job, the sense of inadequacy that reinforces some of the negative behavior patterns that lead to unfortunate outcomes, whether it's struggles with mental health or the ultimate issue with suicidality. So we're working with responders to normalize the experience and to give them tools to recognize what's a normal, acute reaction to trauma, and this is fine, let it play out, don't beat yourself up over it. These are some supportive things you can do in that interim, versus when has it been too long? When has this now become pathologic? When is this something that is beyond your ability or a peer's ability to help you with? And how do we get you to the resources, the clinicians who can help you with that without having shame? And we're working to encourage responders to deal with these experiences in the short term so they don't suffer and they don't risk creating issues that can haunt them for a long time. Right now, we have been working with a variety of entities, including the community college system in Colorado, with various individual agencies to incorporate a curriculum enhancement that talks not only about mental wellness and the challenges of the occupations, but specifically the suicide statistics and the challenges within that specific branch, and giving people a primer, basically, an introduction to these are the things that you can do to take care of yourself. These are the things you can do to help take care of your coworkers. We recognize that this education and the self-awareness from the get-go is probably the most effective thing that we can do. So we are refining our offerings, what we're creating, and it is our hope to reach out to IFSTA, to NAEMT, to POST, to the regulatory organizations for each of the response branches, and to incorporate this training so that nobody goes into the occupations unaware that this is a potential hazard, that they enter the job knowing that, hey, our leading occupational killer is suicide, and I'm not going to go that way. This is how I protect myself. It used to be believed that mask anxiety was something that disqualified somebody, and we know that can be treated. once it's recognized, once we're aware of what's going on, it can be treated and the person can go on to a full career. And what we found in the past is we have inadvertently done a disservice to emergency responders across all branches by not informing them, hey, this is what you're going to encounter. The emotional intensity in calls is probably what's going to impact you more than anything else. And it doesn't mean you're weak. This doesn't disqualify you from the job. This can be managed. Here are the tools to do this. Yes, and we have been so good at educating responders. This is how you cut holes in roofs. This is how you extricate vehicles. This is how you protect yourself from bloodborne pathogens. This is how your body armor works. All of these things, these skills, these tools we've given people have minimized the line of duty death causes from those occurrences. But we realize now, mental health, that's the hazard. We never trained. We knew. We just didn't train anybody on it. We didn't equip them to manage this. And now, unfortunately, we're suffering the consequences of that. We're seeing it reflected in the suffering that we see in responders during their career, in the amounts of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and unfortunately suicide. Responders, because of our culture, have been willing to go to their graves rather than reach out and ask for help because we haven't made it okay. In fact, we have threatened their very identity by telling them, if you're having mental or psychological, emotional impacts from the job, you just can't cut it. You don't belong here. How detrimental has that been? We've seen the studies showing that the culture that we are embedded in tremendously impacts the outcome. If we shift ourselves to becoming a community that openly acknowledges this and empowers our people to take care of themselves and each other, we're going to see a change in those statistics. We know it, and that's what we're working toward. And I think that's one of the powers, the strengths of ResponderStrong, is we are a responder-driven organization. We are working from the inside to change our culture. We see the problems. We've seen them in ourselves, and we've seen them in our coworkers, and we know what the solution is. We just have to have the momentum and the people in the right positions to emphasize and to enact the change we're building. We know that responders inadvertently bring their occupational trauma home to their families, no matter how hard they fight against that. We know that the people who are most likely to recognize changes in the responder's personality or habits or behaviors early on are the family members, those who are closest to them. And we want to empower them to understand that when the responder seems to have had a personality change, is short-tempered, is no longer interested in the family activities, doesn't seem to be the same person he or she was when they entered the occupation, that it's not a character flaw, it's not a reflection on the way they feel about the family. It's signs of unmanaged trauma, and that can be changed, that can be reversed, but we have to acknowledge it, and the sooner we acknowledge it, the better off we are. And we know the divorce rates aren't good. We know that even among those who stay married, lots of times there's needless strife, and it's a manifestation of trauma in the home. Once we've empowered the families to recognize what it is and to insist that the responder get the appropriate help, and we build the bridges, the resources, so that the families don't feel like they're isolated or that they're the second family and not as important as the work family, when it's actually the other way around, then we can have more positive outcomes. The best way to reach us is through our website, ResponderStrong.org. It is in process of being revamped right now to become a more robust site. It is our intended platform for easy access to resources, not only across Colorado, but nationally for responders, and for those populations who are similar to responders, including the coroners group, including ER staff, including wildland firefighters, those who aren't those who are impacted by similar exposures and are experiencing similar outcomes. So our resources are valid for them also. The other great way to reach us is through our Facebook page, ResponderStrong. We have a very active group there. We have very open discussion about not only the issues that plague the response community, but the solutions, the long-term solutions, the ones that are evidence-based, and some of the new emerging solutions. More than anything, I feel like our Facebook group serves as a community to help responders know they're not alone.